Welcome to Court Explainer, Court Explainer, where we are dealing with the questions of renting a premises. And we have raised the issues in the first episode. Episode 2, we are dealing with whenever there is a dispute about rent, where do you go? You don't go to the courts. You don't come to Milimani Law Courts. You don't go to Nyamira High Court. You have to go to a specialized tribunal. There are two tribunals that resolve the question of rents. The first one is for domestic accommodation, where people are residential tenants. That one is called the Rent Restriction Act under Cap 296. These are people who are in low income residential tenancies with a monthly rent not exceeding Kenya Shillings 2,500. You are what is called a protected tenant. If your rent is below 2,500 Kenya Shillings, then whenever there is a dispute, that dispute goes to the Rent Restriction Tribunal. It protects controlled residential tenancies by preventing unlawful rent increases or unfair eviction. The Rent Tribunal deals with controlled tenancies. What does this mean? It protects increase of rent. The landlord cannot wake up and tell you, I have now increased this rent from 1,000 to 1,200. The landlord must go to the rent tribunal to ask that I need to improve. I have improved, I put a toilet now, I need to increase rent. It is the tribunal that allows the tenant to increase the rent. So you get some houses where rent is 500 shillings, 600 shillings, 800 shillings, 1,000, 2,000. The landlord cannot increase rent without the tribunal approving that. That is the first condition. So you are protected. The tenants in these buildings are protected. 2, unfair eviction. Remember, this is where we have seen doors being removed from houses, window panes being removed, the roof, especially this time, the rains are here, the roof is taken. You come back and you find the toilet system has been carried. You come back and find water has been poured into your house. That is unfair eviction. Any eviction of a controlled tenant, that eviction must be sanctioned by the tribunal. So today you know you cannot be evicted without a tribunal hearing you. You must be heard. What does it happen? Many landlords who have tried to evict tenants, when the tenants go to that tribunal, the tenants can be ordered to stay in that house for 5 years without paying rent. That is how bad it is. 2, the amount of rent to be paid is assessed by the tribunal. These are people in the slums. These are people in the areas of the low income earners. So it is the land tribunal that determines how much rent should be paid. Remember, there's nothing called the freedom of negotiation, that the landlord will tell you, here you pay 2,000 shillings. It is the landlord, the tribunal, that assesses and says, for this property, rent will be this, and you cannot increase without the tribunal. So you are a protected tenant, or what is called a controlled tenant. We have the second one, which is called the landlord, a tenant, into brackets, shops, Hotels, Catering Establishments Act, Cap 301. These are for commercial purposes. You have a business, a kinyosi, a spa, a salon, you have a uji shop, you have a milk shop, you have a small kibanda for selling vegetables, you have a small kibanda for selling airtime, you have a small place for charging telephone people. What does the law say? It says this applies to commercial premises including shops, hotels, offices and restaurants. It regulates the uncontrolled tenancies where the duration for rent is not fixed by a written agreement. These are people who don't have written agreements. Boss, nipe nyumbani. Awasi, utafanya nini? Kinyos, shilingi 3,000. Umeelewana. There is no written agreement. 90% of the agreements of people are oral. There's no written agreement, and this now, this law protects people. Do you have any written agreement for your rent, for the house, or for a commercial business? Very few people have this. 3, if there is a dispute, then this is handled by what is called the Business Premises Rent Tribunal, BPRT. During the tenancy, mark my words, if the tenancy expires, if the tenant evicts you, if you are evicted, you cannot go to the tribunal. Mark my words, even the first one, it becomes now a civil matter to court, to the courts of Kenya. You must be sure, and you now know from now, if you are being threatened to be evicted, run to the tribunals. Because if you are evicted, if you are out, the tribunal has no jurisdiction to entertain you. That is a civil matter. You will go to the high court. So, tenants, you now know, don't be thrown out, because once you are thrown out, you will not go out. Many of you, you come in the evening, you find kufuli kwa mlango. You find a place has been locked. Some landlords get a stick, a small stick, they push it into the hole of the kifuli, the padlock. You can't open. Don't go fighting. Rush to the tribunal. Because if the landlord throws you out, then the tribunals lose jurisdiction. You will have to go elsewhere. So then we have tenancy agreement. Those ones where there is an agreement, a lease agreement, a tenancy agreement, that now falls under the law of contract. If you have an agreement, don't just sign that agreement without reading what the agreement says. If you sign blindly, you are bound by that agreement. If the landlord says you'll pay rent of 50,000 shillings and you sign, then you must pay rent for 50,000 shillings. If the landlord puts a clause that when you will leave, you will renovate the house by adding another floor, you will have to do that. So for the contracts, those who have contracts, do not sign a contract without consulting your lawyer. Contracts are chaotic because they are drafted by lawyers. The landlord brings you a contract drafted by his lawyer. You are not a lawyer. You sign that contract. You are bound by that contract. And the courts have said they have no business to interpret or to rewrite a contract. A contract or an agreement by law is assumed it was a discussion, a negotiation. It was a bargaining. You bargained for that, and you must get for that. Anytime Court Helicopter has told you, if you sign any contract, you are bound by that contract. The only time the courts will interfere if that contract was signed out of duress, out of coercion, or out of fraud. But we have told you today the terms of the contract. Read it, bring them to Dunstan, Omari and Associates, take them to your lawyer anywhere in this country to read that contract, because that contract is there. And that contract will be enforced under the Law of Contract Act, Cap 23. So do not enter that issue without understanding that approach. What about termination clauses in a contract? The contract tells you when to terminate, when not to terminate. So if the clause, for example, some contracts tell you that you must sign a lease for 5 years, and you must live in that, especially commercial leases. They are 5 years and 1 month, 5 years and 2 months. So whether your business dies after 1 year, you will continuously pay the rent for 5 years. Read the commercial contracts, agreements for tenancy. They are so punitive to the tenants. So if you are not careful, go to an advocate. The advocate will interpret that clause. Some of you have gotten some small money, a loan. So you take a loan, you buy space, you pay goodwill, you expect that goodwill to be refunded. Read the contract, read the agreement. Is goodwill refundable? If it is refundable, the landlord will put it there. If it is not refundable, whether you go to court making noise, you will not get anywhere to go. You now have understood the tribunal. In the third episode, we are going to deal with the